according to the ulama, هو كل ما عرفه الشرع وأقره من العبادات القولية والفعلية الظاهرة والباطنة. So basically, al-ma'ruf, what is good, is whatever Islam has called good, and whatever the religion approves of. And it can also encompass anything which is known by the people and accepted societally as right, provided that it doesn't go against what Islam says. Wal-munkar is the opposite of that. It's everything that Islam says is wrong and it disapproves of. And it can also encompass those things which societally, according to custom, are deemed unacceptable, provided that it doesn't go against what Islam says. And this amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy al munkar, this commanding what is good and forbidding what is bad, is a fard. It's an obligation. But it's what they call fard kifaya. It is a communal obligation, which means that there has to always be, in every time, in every place, a number of people who do it, and they suffice. And if no one does it, or a number of people do it, but they are insufficient, then the entire community would be responsible. The entire community would be sinful. But if a number of people do it and that number is sufficient, then the entire community is absolved of any sin. So it's not appropriate if all of us see wrong things being done or see some good needing to be enjoined, and we decide to what? To be quiet. We decide not to act, not to say anything. That would be unacceptable. And so we have to understand that it's wrong for people to say that everybody should just mind their own business. And you hear that. And you have communities which are built upon that. That people do things that are wrong and everybody should just what? Not say anything. And people don't do things which are right and which are required. And everybody should be quiet. And nobody should say anything. Everybody should just mind their own business. That our religion isn't built upon that. And you have some religions which are built on the concept of, I'm not my brother's keeper. I'm not responsible for what other people do. Our religion tells you, no, you are. You are your brother's keeper. And we have many indications of that in the Quran and Hadith. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ لِلْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. He says, and let there arise out of you a group of people who will call to all that is good. They'll command what is right, they'll forbid what is wrong, and those people, they're the successful ones. Allah also says, He says, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. He said, you, O Muslims, are the best nation, the best religious community ever extracted from mankind. Now the question is that just because? Or is there some quality that we exhibit that entitles us to this miza, entitles us to this distinction? Allah says, you are the best because what? تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ الْمُنكَرِ وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. He says, you are the best because you have three qualities that make you the best. تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, you enjoy what is right. You forbid what is wrong, and you believe in Allah. You guys see that? And so if we don't exhibit these three characteristics as an ummah, as a religious community, we won't be entitled to this what? This visa of being the best of the people or the best of the nations. Then بعد ذلك, we also have the hadith where the Prophet says, said in the hadith of Sayyid al-Khudri, he said, مَنْ رَأَى مِنْكُمْ مُنْكَرًا فَلْيُغَيِّرُهُ بِيَدِهِ. Whoever amongst you sees something wrong, then he should change it with his hands. He should physically put a stop to it. فَلَمْ يَسْتَطِيعْ. Not everybody is in a position to do that. So if he's not able to do that, فَبِلِسَانِهِ, he should do it with his tongue, with his words. He should give a nasiha. He should give people advice and say, hey, brother, you shouldn't do that. Or brother, you should do this. فَلَمْ يَسْتَطِيعْ فَبِقَلْبِهِ. And if he can't do that, then he should change the wrong with what? With his heart. What does that mean? That he just hates it in his heart while people around him are doing the wrong thing and he doesn't say anything? No. He changes it with the relationship. He changes it with his relationship. He distances himself from the people who do wrong and the wrong that they do. You guys see that? So a Muslim can't go into a bar and people are drinking all around him and say, hey, I'll have a club soda. Right? He can't go into a strip club, right? And take out a book and start reading it. Y'all see that? A Muslim can't do that and say, I hate what these people are doing, and be what? In the company of the people who are doing the wrong thing. You guys see that? A Muslim has to what? Divorce himself from the people, the places, and the things that are what? That are wrong. You guys see that? That's the very least that a Muslim has to do. And the Prophet said, وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. That's the least of faith. Is that you what? You distance yourself from the people who do wrong and the wrong things that they do. There's some conditions, and I want to just talk about that. Some important conditions and things we have to bear in mind if we're going to be the people who do this. The people who command what is good and forbid what is wrong. So the first one of those conditions is in يكون الإنسان عالما بالمعروف والمنكر. The first thing a person, before he's going to open his mouth and command what is good and forbid what is wrong, he has to know what? He has to know for certain, with knowledge and clear understanding, he has to know that the thing that he's going to command is good and the thing he's going to prohibit is wrong. Because many people, they have the zeal, they have the will, they have the desire to command what is good and forbid what is wrong, but they end up what? Commanding what is wrong and forbidding what is right. And so, for example, a person, for example, thinks it's from respect, it's from good character, that when you meet somebody, when you meet somebody, you meet another Muslim, or especially if you meet somebody who do jah. So for example, you meet someone like an imam, or sheikh, or you meet one of your what? One of your elders, or you meet your parent or your grandparent, that you should do what? You should meet them and do this. What's that? That's basically a ruku'ah. That's bowing. That's inhina. You guys see that? That's not permissible for anybody but who? Allah. But you have some people say, oh, you met so-and-so and you didn't what? You didn't bow down. They'll command the person. You should lower yourself because it's so-and-so and such and such. And that commanding of what they think is ma'ruf is actually a command of what? Munkar. Y'all see that? Another example, sometimes what people do is they prohibit what is right out of ignorance. They don't know that something is right. They're not used to it. They're not accustomed to it. That's not what they've seen in their upbringing, their Islamic or spiritual upbringing. And so they tell somebody who's doing the right thing not to do that. You guys see that? So for example, a person might be praying right here in the middle of the masjid, and they have no sutra. Somebody's seeing that and seeing that people are having a hard time moving. They don't want to, move past this person, and because they don't have a sutra, the person might go and do what? They'll put something in front of them. I said that. They want to not only protect this person's prayer, but allow other people who want to pass to pass. So they do what? They do a courtesy. Person says, oh, what are you putting that in front of? You shouldn't put anything in front of a person. Nobody should pray with anything in front of them. They should never pray with anything in front of them. They don't understand the concept of what? The sutra. They may even go behind the person who put the sutra down and do what? And pick it up. And then tell the person, don't ever do that again. You guys see that? That person is actually commanding they are prohibiting what is right. And I often tell you guys a story about an individual when I was in Vermont, and I would lead the prayer. I would turn to face the jama'ah, to face the congregation. And he told me after one of the prayers, he said, you should never do that. Don't ever turn and face the people after prayer. Because he said it's from arrogance. And he said when you do that, the people feel like you're watching them. You got it right? But we know the Prophet ﷺ, after he would pray, Kani Ansarif, he would do what? He would turn to the right. And people used to love to be on the Prophet's right side. So when he would turn, he would look at them. Kani Ansarif. This was the way of the Prophet. But this person prohibited me from doing something the Prophet did. Not because he knows it's right, but because he doesn't know it's right, out of ignorance. The thing about that from the condition is أن تعلم بأن هذا الرجل تارك للمعروف أو فاعل للمنكر ولا تأخذ الناس بالتهمة أو الظن. So basically, the second thing a person has to do, once they know what right from wrong, they have to be sure that the person that they want to tell the right thing or prohibit from doing the wrong thing, they have to make sure that that person actually did something wrong or failed to do something that was right. They have to be sure of this, and they shouldn't just what? Make assumptions. They shouldn't presume, oh, I didn't see him do this, or I thought I saw him do that, and so I'm going to command good or forbid evil and end up being wrong and basically accusing someone of something that they weren't guilty of. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he used to ask people before he would command good or forbid evil, even though he saw something with his own eyes, he would always what? Ask. And what that also teaches you is that asking is not the same as what? Al-inkar. Asking somebody a question is not the same as scolding them or criticizing them. You guys see that? It's not. So for example, we have famously the Prophet ﷺ, once he was on the minbar. And when you're on the minbar, you can pretty much what? You can pretty much see everything. You're right, you're in a high position and you're able to what? Get a good view of everything. A man walked in, clearly in the Prophet's eyesight, and he walked in and he sat down. The Prophet saw him walk in and sit down. So the Prophet ﷺ, he asked him, he said, Ya fulan, sallaita? Right? He said, oh so-and-so, did you pray? Did you greet the masjid with 2 units of prayer? And the man said, yeah. He said, La ya Rasulullah. He said, no, I didn't pray. He said, Qum, fasalli, wa awjiz. He said, stand up, pray, and what? And make it quick. So you notice the Prophet ﷺ, he what? He asked the person. He didn't just say, I saw you didn't pray. What you doing? No, he asked him. And he's teaching us by doing that, even though he saw it himself, he's teaching us by doing this is the way you should approach it. You should always be sure before you command good or forbid evil. Don't make assumptions about people. We talked about this when we were doing the reflections on Kitab al-Tawheed, where the Prophet saw a man with what? With that brass band around his bicep. You guys remember that? And he said, Ya fulan ma hada. He said, oh, so-and-so, what is this? He didn't assume that he was wearing it tabarrukan or wearing it katamima. He didn't assume that he was wearing it as what? As something that would protect him from harm or procure some benefit. He asked him, and the man said, Min al-wahida. I'm wearing it to prevent weakness. Right? And then the Prophet prohibited him. He said, Inzi'ha fa innaha la tazidak illa wahna. He said, take it off because it will only do what? Increase you in weakness. But notice the Prophet, he asked. طيب ثم بعد ذلك or just make another point on this as it relates to this is that we should ask before we command what is right or forbid what is wrong, but it's also important that we don't do what? Tatabbu' al-awrat, and we don't do a tajassus. That basically we see somebody off in the distance and we're like, what's this person doing? We don't do that in Islam. And we don't spy on people. We don't look for what? Look to see if people are doing wrong. Actively chase them to see. Investigate to see if they're doing wrong. If it comes across us, if it falls in our lap, we have to address it. But we don't spy on people. Hey, I saw you at the market the other day. I don't know if you saw me, but I saw you at the mall and you were with a woman. Who was that woman? Y'all see that? Could be his sister. Could be his mother. Could be his aunt. Could be his niece. Y'all see that? It could be. But look at all these ihtimalat. Look at all these possibilities before we get to the girlfriend. Yeah. But we assume, who is that woman? Let me get my...
Take a picture.
Exactly. You know what I mean? Oh, that's not what we do. It's not how Muslims are supposed to behave. Y'all see that? طيب ثم بعد ذلك another one of the conditions, and this is very, very important. أن يكون رفيقا بأمره ورفيقا في نهيه. لأنه إذا كان رفيقا أعطاه الله سبحانه وتعالى ما لا يعطي على العنف. There's actually a hadith with the Prophet ﷺ. He said, إن الله رفيق يحب الرفق. Allah is gentle, He loves gentleness, and He gives through gentleness what He does not give through harshness. And so when we command the good and forbid the evil, We have to be gentle. And this is not always the easiest thing to do, but we have to strive for this. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is that there is a place, although gentleness is the original case, there is a place for what? For harshness. And sometimes you have to do what? You start off gentle, but then you have to what? You have to escalate, because some people don't respond to gentleness. They don't respond appropriately, or they don't take you seriously if you're what? If you're gentle. I'm not saying this to justify harshness. I'm saying that harshness has its place and the evidence supports it. And for example, you have instances, for example, the Prophet ﷺ would say something harsh to someone. Although his original state was gentleness, his original approach was gentleness, there were instances where what? He was harsh. He spoke harshly to let people know the seriousness of the situation, the circumstance, or the thing that they had done. We also have instances of the early Muslim where they did the same thing. For example, Umar al-Khattab, there was a man who was going around saying things that were contradictory to the teaching of Islam, theological things, confusing people. Umar summoned him. And he said, what is it? He said, "Ma alladhi fi ra'sik?" He said, what is it that you have to say? What is it? What are these thoughts? So he started saying some of those thoughts. And Umar took an asa, he took a stick and started beating him with it. And he beat the man and beat the man. He said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, qad dhahaba ma fi ra'si. He said, these things that were in my head, they're gone now. And he did that because why? It's dangerous. These things are really dangerous. And he wanted other people to see that there'll be consequences for people who go and try to confuse people as it relates to what? Their faith. Umar al-Khattab one time famously, he came across a man who was publicly inebriated, publicly intoxicated during the fi nahari Ramadan, in the daytime in Ramadan. He said, Anta sakran wa sibyan siyam. He said, you're drunk. And our kids who are not responsible for fasting are fasting. And he did what? And he struck him. Also, remember we talked about a few weeks back, we talked about how Ibn Mas'ud, he was at a funeral. And one of the men at the funeral was laughing. He was laughing. And Ibn Mas'ud said, Tabhak fi janaza? He said, you're laughing during a funeral? He said, Wallahi lan ukallimaka abadan. He said, I'll never talk to you again. Y'all remember that? I say all this to say is that harshness has its place. The other thing too is that, and I want to say this about this, is that a lot of times we can't even agree on what constitutes harshness. For some people, if you raise your voice slightly, you're being harsh. And for some people, if you just tell them that what they're doing is wrong, you're being harsh. You guys see that? Mm-hmm. And so this is another thing too, the perception of what constitutes harshness. Some people, they call, if there's any resistance to what they're doing, the wrong things that they're doing, they call it harsh. Not being harsh to them is not saying anything. So if you say, for example, I do this. I say, sometimes we have things going around in the masjid and their kids, and I say to the families, I'll say, hey, everybody, just watch your kids. And some people say that's harsh. Even if I say it, and I don't believe I yell it when I say it, but I say it in those words and in that way. I say, watch your kids. They say you're being harsh. You're insulting the families. You're making them feel bad. You're being rude to the families. You're being crude. And I'm just saying, watch your kids. And I'm saying, watch your kids out of genuine concern. I've seen kids go around this blind corner and bump head to head. I've seen kids go out of this masjid bleeding from what? I've seen kids have their doors what? Slammed. They're playing, they're running from each other, and somebody runs into the door and they want to keep the other people running the door. They don't realize that there's a child with their hand extended, and do what? They close the door on their hand. I'm saying for the safety of the kids. But just those words, watch your kids, to some people are harsh. We can't even agree on what constitutes harshness. Another important one is that we have to be very, very careful not to seek to eradicate some wrong. And as a consequence, we end up what? Replacing one wrong thing with a wrong which is even worse than it. We replace some bad thing. We want to stop this bad thing from happening. We end up what? Replacing it with, or causing an even worse one, an even worse thing. And so we have to be very, very careful about that and have a little bit of foresight and say to ourselves, okay, if I prohibit this bad thing, is the person I prohibit going to do something even worse than that? Y'all see that? So we have to have a little bit of foresight, and there's no way you can know for sure because nobody knows the future except Allah. But if you 80%, 70%, 75%, 90%, you think, yeah, if I do this, he's gonna do this, which is a worse thing than what you don't prohibit it. And famously, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he was in Syria when Syria was conquered by the Tartars. And the Tartars were people who came, and when they came, they wreaked havoc, and they left, chaos and, just ruin in their wake. So they raped, they robbed, they pillaged. This is what they did. So during their seizure of the town that he was in, he was walking with one of his companions. I think they were going out to the masjid. And they came across a group of the Tartar soldiers who were what? Who were drinking alcohol. They were drinking alcohol and doing what those people do. So, Ibn Taymiyyah's companion was mashhoon. He was upset. People were drinking alcohol. What's wrong? We should say something to them. And Ibn Taymiyyah told him, don't say anything to those people. He says, because those people, when they're not drinking, they're what? They're raping, robbing, and pillaging. They're plundering. They're wreaking havoc. They're causing harm. And the thing that keeps them from doing those things is what? It's this alcohol. And the raping and robbing and pillaging and the wreaking of havoc is worse than them drinking alcohol and hurting themselves instead of hurting other people. Y'all see that? And so basically we do have to consider that, consider the harm that may come if we command the good and forbid the evil. Then there was one thing that came up a couple weeks back, and I want to address that because it's good to readdress it. And the Imam, he addresses it in this way. He says, اختلف العلماء رحمهم الله تعالى هل يشترط أن يكون الآمر والناهي فاعلا لما أمر به تاركا لما نهى عنه أو لا؟ والصحيح أنه لا يشترط، وأنه إذا أمر بمعروف أو نهى عن المنكر ولو كان لا يفعل المعروف ولا يتجنب المنكر فإن ذنبه عليه، لكن يجب أن يأمر وينهى، لأن إذا ترك الأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر لكونه لا يفعل المأمور ولا يترك المحظور لأضاف ذنبا إلى ذنبه. So basically what the Imam said is he's talking about this issue of, okay, what if I'm going to command something that's good, but I myself, I don't do it? And what if I'm going to prohibit some bad thing and I myself do it? It just seems like it's not proper for me to speak on this because why? I'm guilty of it myself. So he says, in a case like this, it's not ideal, but a person should still what? If they know something is right, they should what? They should say it. And if they know something is wrong, they should prohibit it. Because if they don't do that, they're adding a sin to another sin. You guys see that? That basically they're adding their own sin of failing to do what they're required to do. Adding to that their failure to what? To command what is good and forbid what is evil. Okay, so they should do that. Although, again, it's not ideal, and the person is what? They're sinful for doing whatever it is they're doing, that is wrong. And the last thing I want to say on this point before we close is that it's very, very important when a person is going to command what is good and forbid what is evil, and yusahih niyatuhu, wa an yuraji niyatuhu, that basically a person has to correct their intentions, purify their intentions, and they have to what? Constantly inspect and do inventory of their intentions. They have to do it for the right reason. They have to do it for Allah. And they have to do it because they want al-islah. A lot of times people command what is good and forbid what is wrong, and they don't realize but they're doing it to what? To show off. Or they command what is good and forbid what is wrong, and they do it maybe to humiliate the person, to expose the person. And all of those things will undermine the barakah, the blessing, and they'll undermine the reward that a person could potentially get for commanding what is good and forbidding what is evil. So to make sure that we do it for the right reasons, we command good and forbid wrong. I'm sorry. We command what is right and forbid what is wrong, because first of all, we want Allah's reward. Number two is because we want things to be right. We want morality to be promoted. We want immorality to be minimized or eliminated. This should be our intention. It should not be our intention to what? To be the one who I showed him, I told him, right? Or the one who appears as if they know something other people don't know, or to appear more righteous than other people, etc. and so on. And so we just have to make sure that the intention is good. And inshallah ta'ala, next week we'll take maybe a hadith from this chapter. And as always, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those who listen to the talk and follow the best of it. Wa jazakallahu khairan. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak wa Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. All right, I think we have some tea, we have some